Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the Muslim Network, a channel dedicated to growing the wealth of the Ummah through Islamically compliant businesses. Alhamdulillah, over the past few videos, we've seen a few members join, which makes me feel like this content's actually doing something. If, of course, you want to join the Muslim Network Discord, be sure to check out the link in the description and make yourself known and try and grab as many opportunities as possible. In today's installment of Islamic Finance Fundamentals, we will be discussing Mudarabah, a trust-based profit-sharing contract. In this contract, you need two or more parties, which involves a Rab al-Mal, which will provide capital to a Mudarib, who will conduct business activities in the interest of creating profit. This contract has many applications, so it might be useful to think of it as an investor investing in a startup. So the funder is the Rab al-Mal and the CEO may be the Mudarib. They have a contract that agrees that they'll conduct some business activities and then share the profits upon conclusion. Certain conditions are required for a Mudarabah to be valid. A memorandum of understanding is an agreement between two or more parties where it outlines how they will work together, and this is required for a Mudarabah. This is required because it removes any ambiguity and makes clear what will be required for the contract to be complete. In a memorandum of understanding, you will want to state the following: the sum of money that the Mudarabah capital will be, the duration of the contract, whether the Mudarabah is restricted or unrestricted, these are things we'll get into detail later on, whether this will be part of a series of Mudarabah or a standalone contract, the profit ratio between the Rab al-Mal and the Mudarib, guarantees by the Mudarib to cover negligence, misconduct or breach of contract and any other relating issues, and of course the conclusion of the contract. This is a common theme in Islamic contracts, having a contract that clearly states what is expected and how it will include. This is to ensure that all parties do not have expectations that are not clearly stated. It is important that both parties possess the ability to delegate responsibility to others known as agents, but they must also accept responsibility for actions taken on their behalf by an appointed agent. Their age and mind need to be legally acceptable in order to prevent people being taken advantage of. The contract cannot be used to ensure that business goes to the Rab al-Mal, but they are not excluded from being used as a service. So say I'm a contracting business and I'm creating this Mudarabah with a company that builds houses and sells them. Whilst the Rab al-Mal can't enforce that the Mudarib uses their contracting company, the Mudarib does have the option to do so. It just cannot be enforced in the contract. As mentioned before, there are two types of Mudarabah: restricted and unrestricted. These are terms you may have heard of in previous Islamic finance fundamental videos. A restricted Mudarabah is where Mudarib is restricted in how the Mudarabah funds can be used. These can be restricted by type or location of investments as the Rab al-Mal sees fit. That said, they cannot unduly constrain the Mudarib from his operations, i.e. having highly seasonal investments and hard to find products. This is where the Mudarib and the Rab al-Mal will need to negotiate to see what is reasonable. As you might imagine, an unrestricted Mudarabah is when the Mudarib is not restricted in what they can do with the Mudarabah funds, as long as the activities that they are conducting are in the interest of the Rab al-Mal and the Mudarib, i.e. making profit. You may see this when someone acts as a silent investor, allowing the Mudarib to do what they think is best with the funds in order to return a profit, as they may have a better expertise in that area. The capital must be provided in the form of cash, i.e. readily available, liquid, and easily used to fund the business activities. This means it may be presented in the form of tangible assets, which have been valued by an expert or by contracting parties. This is to ensure that Mudarabah capital is clearly known by the parties. This also means that the debt owed to the Mudarib cannot be used to fund the Mudarabah contract. It is important that the Mudarib is able to use all or partial funds for the Mudarib's business activities, and it should be easily accessible. An important part of Mudarabah is profit distribution. So you may be thinking, why is the profit ratio so important? Well, that's because the whole point of the contract is to turn a profit, and it must be clearly stated how this profit will be distributed. Once the work is done or the specified time period has ended, the profits can then be distributed. As mentioned before, the profit ratio needs to be stated, which will determine how the profit should be distributed between the Rab al-Mal and the Mudarib. This ratio and contract period can be changed at any time during the contract period. This might be useful when investments take longer than expected to return. It is not permissible to agree on a lump sum, i.e. the Rab al-Mal gets £10,000 in profit. Rather, you use something called a ceiling. So what this means is that you could have a 50-50 split, but the Rab al-Mal profit could be capped at £10,000. But it does mean that if they hit £5,000 of profit, the Rab al-Mal will get 50% and the Mudarib will get the other 50%. In other words, this means profits exceeding a certain amount specified will go to one of the parties. If there is none, then the Mudarib will receive common market price for the kind and amount of services they provided. It is important to note that it is not permissible to split the capital into multiple amounts and the profit earned on one goes to Mudarib or the Rab al-Mal and the profit from another sum goes to the other party. The profit should be shared according to the contract profit ratio regardless of time, period, or which sum of capital funds the profits. This contract does not guarantee profit, so that means these investments can go south and losses can be incurred, and these would be incurred by the Rab al-Mal, and there is no recourse against the Mudarib providing they are not negligent and the business activity just did not return the profits desired. If the Mudarib is commingling their funds with the Mudarabah capital, the Mudarib is entitled to the profits proportional to the funds that they contributed to the commingled funds. For example, if there is 100,000 used for the Mudarabah contract and Mudarib also contributes another 100,000 and these funds are used for a certain business activity in the Mudarabah contract, and the return is 50,000 in profit, the Mudarabah contract may state that there's a 60-40 split between the Rab al-Mal and the Mudarib. The actual profit split will be as follows. Given the Mudarib contributed 50% of the capital for the business activity, they will earn 50% of the overall profit. So they have 25,000 so far. This leaves the remaining 25,000 to be distributed according to the contract, which is stated 60% to the Rab al-Mal and 40% to the Mudarib. The Rab al-Mal has earned 15,000 and the Mudarib has earned an additional 10,000, which results in a total profit for the Mudarib of 35,000 and a total profit for the Rab al-Mal of 15,000. The Mudarib is also entitled to a share of the profits as soon as it clears, i.e. the Mudarabah has led to the realization of profit. So if you have stocks, for example, and they invested and it's appreciated to a certain value that they're happy with, they sell out of the shares before the end of the contract, the Mudarib has rights to that profit. However, this is not absolute. Profits may need to be kept to ensure the protection of capital. Now that we have established what is required in a contract and how profits should be handled, we need to know how a contract is concluded. Contracts can be unilaterally terminated except in two cases: when the Mudarib has already commenced business activities, making it binding until the date of actual or constructive liquidation. The second case is when contracting parties agree to determine a duration for which the contract will remain active, requires mutual agreement to terminate before this date. Otherwise, there are a few cases where the contract can be terminated. Consent of both parties, as mentioned before. On the date of maturity, if two parties had earlier agreed to a set time limit. when funds of the Mudarabah contract have been exhausted or have suffered losses, the death of the Mudarib, or liquidation of the institution which acts as the Mudarib. This contract is about making sure that the money that sits in the bank account actually leads to economic activity, as opposed to laying stagnant in a bank account, which is what happens with a lot of these really wealthy people. I believe this is great for everyone and actually kind of gives you the trickle down economics by putting that money to actual use. It also means that the losses incurred are on those that can afford to do so, providing the Rab al Mal is not risking essential funds. This allows those that are willing to work to create economic activity and also build the means to become wealthy. If we want to bring a new age of ethical finance, I believe it is very important to take these contracts on board and learn how to apply them to our needs. For example, I could see this being used for a loan for the purpose of buying a house. If someone needs to borrow an extra 10k, they can enter a Mudarabah with a Rab al Mal, where they funded £10,000 and the rent money could be based on the local rates, decoupled from interest rates, and an agreed portion can go to the Rab al Mal for a period of time until the loan has been paid off and a profit has been made. The risk would be the costs involved in the maintenance of the house. The details can be agreed in the contract. With that said, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to check out the Muslim Network Discord by clicking on the link in the description. Make sure you make yourself known so other people can know how they can connect with you and what potential future business projects there may be. One of the other goals of the Muslim Network is to, inshallah, lead to people finding a source of employment from Muslim-owned businesses. I would like this to be a place where they could advertise those positions. Also, be sure to have a look at the rest of the other videos in the series. We did one just before on Hawala, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I know it sounds cringy, but the reality is it does seem to help with the metrics. Please share, it really helps. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.